Have you ever thought that death is not the end, but another beginning? In this world full of magic and intrigue, the protagonist has gone through 5 lifetimes of reincarnation, each one full of pain and struggle. From being betrayed to being tortured, she has never been able to escape the trickery of fate, until she meets the dark high priest Eve, a mysterious and powerful being who seems to hold the secret of her rebirth. But what is the truth? Is it redemption, or just another elaborate trap? As the forces of light and darkness intertwine, and as the game of the gods quietly unfolds, will she be able to break the chains of fate and find true freedom? Follow in her footsteps as she unravels a world full of mysteries and witnesses an epic adventure of love, betrayal and rebirth. Am I a joke to you? A pastime? One of your many pranks to entertain you? I spitted out the words like venom. He had given me hints. Quite a few. I just refused to think about that or to believe that. I was shaking in anger. All those times I struggled and then died tragically were all a joke to him. I really experienced all of them. The deaths, the tortures, the hope, and then failed again. I was killed in your first life, he suddenly said. After you death. When Rochelle and her gang came to take the final piece of the jewel shard from my temple. I was killed. And then of course I revived myself. I am the High Priest of Darkness. I had several dark spells under my sleeves. You didn't even know me in your first life. Why did you revive me? The spell drained my power. I needed to rest for a long period of time before I can act again, he said coldly. It's like a knife piercing through my heart. So you needed entertainment. I am the entertainment. I laughed. And I thought you were really helping me. I am a clown all along. I cried. He looked at me without any emotions. That's when I realized he was really a heartless monster. The man without any emotion was the real him. He was wearing a mask all along. I hugged the cloak closer to me. I felt cold. I won't deny that. That's my initial intention. But I genuinely enjoyed your company. The first time in 500 years. After the death of my parents, I refused to look at him. If you have read the registry, you will have realized that the god of darkness doesn't have many followers. The Ardens being the only family serving the god. So the god blessed us Ardens. We can have long lives. Difficult to be injured. Immortality. If you can handle the long imprisonment in the temple. His lips finally quirked up in a sardonic smile. You can end your life only when you have groomed the next high priest. My father passed me his position as soon as I reached 25. He could no longer handle the imprisonment, the immortality. He had lived in this temple for 600 long years. Now it's my turn. That had nothing to do with me. I would not give him my pity. I was not Rochelle. I thought you'd come find me once you're reborn in your third life, but you ran away to the continent across the sea. I was angry. He sighed. You knew I was a selfish tyrant. In all those lives, you never once came and tried to save me. You said you're not Rochelle. You told me you didn't need knights in shining armors to save you. So you're saying the faults are mine? I told you to call me when you needed me, did you? He asked without any emotions on his face. You know I could not leave the temple without reasons. I was weakened after the spell to revive both you and me. I fell into deep sleep every now and then to recover. I need you to call me to wake me up. I opened my mouth and then closed again. He had told me to call him when I needed him. But I did not trust him nor his promise. He had said it again and again that I had woken him up from his sleep and I thought it was a joke. Then what about now? You can now sneak out of your temple. I don't see you hibernating. The spell weakened me. After 3 lifetimes, I recovered. You said you'd be hibernating, then you didn't need entertainment. Why did you involve me? Do you understand the pain of being tormented and then opening your eyes to find I have to repeat everything again? Only to be tormented again? I just want to die in peace. I squatted down and broke down crying. I cried for the first time in my 5 lives. I finally let out all the loneliness, the regrets, the hatred, the frustration I had bottled up in me. I have been living in this prison since I was born. I want this immortality to end too. He left his throne and walked towards me. He then patted me on my head. And even if I am hibernating, I can still sense my surrounding through Blake. That's the use of a familiar. Can I finally rest in peace after this life? I just want to lead a normal life and then die when it was my time. I don't want to be involved in Rochelle's mess anymore. I don't know. It's your spell. Have you ever wondered why I revived myself if I also want to end my near-immortal life? That's true. He said he wanted to end everything. But why did he revive himself when his wish was fulfilled? Because you haven't groomed the next high priest? I hiccuped as I wiped tears away from my eyes. He chuckled and said, partly, but not the major reason. Everyone in this world is a chess piece in the game the gods are playing. Another cryptic sentence. Aren't you tired, squatting here? His usual smile was back on his face. I did not know who the real him was. This one who faced everything with a lazy smile on his face, or the one as emotionless and bleak as ice? The one who was lazy, capricious, but also gentle, or the one who was cruel and heartless? I was confused and lost. I would not say I forgave him now. I knew deep down I was still a bit angry at him. But if I was not given this chance to reborn, I would have stayed as the naive, childish, ill-tempered heiress till the very end. I would not have the chance to meet Isabel or him. I would not have the chance to try something different, to know there's a world outside of my betrothal with Henri. Even though you're not tired squatting here, I am, announced the selfish high priest. Wah, where are you carrying me? I cried in shock as I was carried by him deeper into the temple. Let me down. Soon all of my internal struggles left my mind when I was focused on trying to let him release me. I woke up with Isabel jumping onto me. She kept poking me with her paws. All right, stop poking, Isabel. I hugged Isabel with one arm and sat up while entangling my hairs with my fingers. That's when I saw the High Priest of Darkness sitting in a chair close to the window, across the room. Oh right, I was still in the temple. I buried my face in my hands. Good morning. You finally wake up, he said. I am hungry. I picked up the pillow on my side and threw it at him. Go cook yourself. Now who angered you in the early morning? He asked with a smiley face. I wonder who? I threw the other pillow at him as well. Get out. I fumed as I stormed out of the room. All he cared was his breakfast. I was still angry at him. Who would cook breakfast for him? Meow. Isabel jumped out from nowhere. It meowed several times and then ran towards a room. It turned its head and looked at me when it saw me still standing there. You want me to follow you? I asked. Meow. I follow. It's led to the living room. Eve was already there sitting behind a table with food on top. I occupied the other chair opposite to him, and I started to dig in. I still didn't know how to face him. Should I be angry at him for placing that reborn curse on me? For treating me as an entertainment? But I knew that's what he was like from my second life. From the first time I met him, he agreed to assist me in my revenge only because he found it interesting. And I didn't mind at that time because I had gotten what I wanted. And I did treasure the chances I had to improve myself and live a better life. A life for myself. I was so conflicted. I sighed. Where did you steal the food? I asked after long silence. I couldn't stand it anymore. Please don't use such distasteful word to describe me. You told me to cook breakfast. So I did that. You cooked this? Is there another high priest in this room? You know how to cook? If I don't, how can I survive in this temple alone for hundreds of years? Then why didn't you cook in the past? Lazy. I stared at him and munched the food in my mouth. This horrendous tyrant. Did those high priests punish you for breaking the rules? The usual smile hung on his face. Are you worried I might be hurt by them? No. I avoided his eyes. But I remember a certain someone came riding for 3 days straight and kneeling in front of my throne crying. Did I dream it? I was not kneeling in front of your throne or even crying, I said with clenched teeth. He shrugged nonchalantly. It's a game these high priests and I play. Their punishments are like tickles. They're a pester. I fell asleep while listening to them droning on and on. I am not that weak. He glared at me with his eyes as a warning and then the smiles returned. I won't worry about you ever again. I mumbled. Pardon? They thought you're the one ordering Rochelle to steal those shards. I have told those stubborn priests that I had no desire to be linked to this stepsister of yours in any way. Not even in the same sentence. I doubt they trust you. They will when Rochelle came to my temple to steal the shard. Maybe they thought it's just a ploy. If it's done by me, then I will admit it. I don't like other people taking my honors. I rolled my eyes. Do you plan to take revenge on Rochelle? Because she killed you? He just responded with a mysterious smile. So how did you die in your third life? He asked suddenly. You had been killed by that lover of the fire priest in your previous life. Then what about your third life? I was hanged because my father attempted treason. I froze and then groaned while cradling my head in my hands. The treason, how can I forget? Even if I sidestep every trap now, if my father's treason is discovered, I'll still be executed. I just want to die normally. After I grow old, is it that hard? Eve smiled knowingly at me. I groaned in misery. You know. Of course you know. There's Blake spying for you. If there's Blake, why did you order me to spy on Rochelle? If I didn't come find you this life, you'd probably forget about your father's treason till it's too late. I glared at him. It's more fun this way. He shrugged. And I am no longer angry at you. He said he was angry that I didn't come find him when I was reborn in my third life. Maybe I just hadn't trusted him as much as I thought. My second life was definitely my happiest among the 4 lives, but they all still ended tragically. Maybe I didn't want my heart to break again. Rochelle's next goal was the Temple of Earth. Ah, yes. You don't have to spy for me this time. The town where Earth Temple is situated is boring. He waved dismissively. Feel free to sort out your father's desire to betray the Emperor in the meantime. I sighed. Could I just ask my father to disown me? Then I wouldn't be related to him. No, that seemed too cold-blooded of me. He was still my father. A spellbook was pushed across the table. Eve was smiling evilly at me. Feel free to use this. Are you trying to groom me into a high priestess of darkness and then die? Of course not. He smiled innocently. You can't reach the lowest standard of high priestess even in 500 years' time. That's too time-consuming. I wanted to pour the cup of tea in front of me on his face. I kicked Eve beneath the table before stomping away with the spellbook. I was so frustrated. I didn't remember much about father's case of treason from my third life. I hid on a continent across the sea for more than 7 years. Once I arrived back home, I was captured and then sent to jail. I really didn't hear much about the case. Was my father framed? You couldn't blame me for thinking this. Father was a priest in the Temple of Wind, but he was not a high priest. He was just one of the many priests in the temple. He wasn't even holding a tremendous amount of power. Father wasn't stupid. He wouldn't overthrow the ruler with just the little power he held in the temple. In our country, the emperor or empress reigning was supposed to be neutral. The ruler received blessings from all gods. They would not serve a particular god. This prevented each temple from supporting their own candidate. Thus, all the potential heirs would not study in any one of the temples. So how did father attempt treason? What was he even betraying? I was pulling out my hair when Isabel meowed. You look so frustrated. The heartless monster known as Eve laughed shamelessly. I glared at him. You suggested me to sort out my father's mystery, so now I'm devoting all my brainpower on it. I have zero clue. Is your twisted heart satisfied now? To see me this frustrated? A bit. He smiled happily. I couldn't hold back anymore. I threw the cushion at him. He stepped to the side to dodge it. Do you know anything? I know you do. Blake has been spying all along. His smile deepened. I am the High Priest of Darkness. I don't do things for free. Then what do you want? I am going to nap now. It'll be great if there's tea when I wake up. Even better if it's perfectly timed. I fumed. But there's a shortcut. I should grasp it. It's no use racking my brain when it's clear I didn't have that information. I stormed out of the room to bake some cookies for him. Holding a tray with cookies and tea, I entered the room Eve was napping in. When I opened the door, he was already awake, sitting in an armchair. Arg. You're late. Do you want it or not? He walked towards me and picked up a piece of cookie from the tray. He took a bite of it and said, You really learned a lot of things during the last 2 lives. The spoiled girl I first met certainly couldn't bake cookies. Try pretending to be best friend with Rochelle. I am sure even you can master baking a 3-tier cake. Do you want some? He dangled his half-eaten cookie in front of me. Just eat. He placed the cookie he was holding near my mouth and I took a bite without thinking. My face seemed to explode after that. Do you want to eat it or not? I threatened. He started laughing uncontrollably. Why are you still this shy? He gazed at me with a huge grin on his face. He tapped me lightly on the head and took the tray from my hand. He sat down on the armchair and said, I hope you knew that your stepsister had become empress in the end. The empress. The sacred empress Rochelle. Wait, you mean she didn't just marry the emperor? I thought she just married the emperor and was crowned empress. You mean she had been the ruler? Of course. She aimed for nothing less. I don't think your stepsister even chose one of those stupid men circling her in the end. Then was my father framed? Imagine if your own daughter has ascended the throne, but you found your husband is trying to look for his own long-lost daughter. Your stepdaughter. What will you think? My stepmother? She thought I would threaten Rochelle's position as empress? So she planned to kill my father and me? That's stupid. On what ground could I threaten the sacred empress Rochelle, who was a genius, with lots of powerful suitors? He shrugged. All I can say is your stepmother is more of a moron than you can imagine. She even convinced some of Rochelle's foolish suitors to carry out the plan. So I was killed because of some moron? I cried in despair. Sometimes morons are more powerful than the smart. He leaned back against the chair and took another bite of the cookie in his hand. I was speechless. That's the reason I was killed in my third life? My stepmother had even planned to kill her own husband. The husband who doted on her. If she had been such a dumb, short-sighted moron from the start, then what about my other lives? Oh yes, turned out she had a hand in your death in your first life too. Eve added nonchalantly. Your father seemed to have found out what your stepmother had done a few months after your death. It was a huge scandal. That's why I heard of you. Why are you telling me this? Leading me on so that I asked you the correct questions so you could tell me this. Bored? No. I didn't believe him. From all these, it felt like he wanted to tell me my father actually cared about me more than I had thought. And the one I should actually be careful of was my stepmother. I stared at him for a moment and then stomped out of the room. When I returned I had a plate of macaroons I had baked for myself. I placed it on the table in front of him. I baked more than I have planned. I turned my head away after saying this, wishing he hadn't caught my bright red ears. He chuckled. He then tugged my little finger with his and then said, "Let's eat together. Not that I am complaining, but can you stay here for such a long time?" Eve, who was standing behind the armchair I was sitting on, leaned down and whispered into my ear, "Can you talk properly?" I shifted a bit away from him. He chuckled and then finally settled down on the seat next to me. "And they won't care, as long as I return in the end." I waved dismissively. He continued gazing at me with his all-knowing red eyes. He looked like he was expecting some kind of farce that would happen in a moment to entertain him. "Why are you looking at me like that? You made me second-guess myself. It's always been like this." I disappeared, maybe going on a shopping spree around the country. Father wouldn't say anything. He didn't care as long as I returned. "I gave you plenty of hints already. Don't come hating on me when you face difficulties." He shrugged, the all-knowing smile still hanging on his face. Hints? What had I missed? I thought back to my previous lives. At this time point, I would have already died in both my second and fourth lives. While I was still alive in my third, I was in hiding, so that left my first life. I remembered at that time, I had already been dumped by Henri in front of all my family members, and my hatred towards Rochelle intensified. I was always thinking of ways to beat Rochelle. The final choosing of Wind Temple was in a few weeks, and that's where I met my final downfall. I remembered around that time, even worse scandals and gossips about me began to circulate. Like the fact that I had several lovers. That's why Henri dumped me. Like how I had beaten my servants to death. On the other hand, Rochelle was described as an angel, a goddess who had descended and graced our country. This had of course angered me even more at that time. The final choosing of Wind Temple for priests and priestess. My final downfall. Those gossips. My stepmother's involvement in my death. Now I suspected those gossips were also my stepmother's doing. But I hadn't been hostile to my stepmother and Rochelle in this life. I was keeping to basic politeness. Not too close, yet not too hostile. She wouldn't plan to kill me this life too, would she? My stepmother might do something to harm me? I asked hesitantly. She might be worried I would threaten Rochelle's position in the Wind Temple. Eve didn't say anything, but just continued feeding Blake leisurely. That's stupid. I am bad at magic. Everyone knows that. There's no way I can defeat her goddess of daughter. But you have reborn. Wah. Because I had already lived out 4 lives, my ability to do magic had greatly improved. I was not excelling every subject, but I was proficient. That's because I spent more time studying in magic after my death in my first life. I knew I shouldn't even be hating on Rochelle when I had never even spent time on studying. Granted, Rochelle could just do every spell pretty well after observing the spell once. Even though my magical ability now isn't as bad as I have originally thought, that doesn't mean I can beat her daughter. Rochelle is a genius. Your stepmother is a moron from the countryside. She's a short-sighted, narrow-minded moron from the countryside. All she had in her mind was the welfare of her daughter. She wouldn't have understood the logistics of the choosing or my magical ability. She simply knew that father hadn't scolded me as much as she expected on my studies. Then she feared I would threaten Rochelle in some ways. Why would my father choose such a wife? I heaved a sigh. It's such a disgrace to our family. If she's really such a narrow-minded woman from the countryside as you have said, bad gossips of me will have circulated by now that I left home for such a long time. How would I know? I glared at him as I called for Isabel. I turned the spellbook to the page about having your familiar spying for you. Isabel, I need your help. When you return, I will cook a huge meal for you. Okay? I smiled dotingly at Isabel and ruffled its fur. Isabel meowed and then disappeared. A huge meal. Eve raised his eyebrow. And the guy who helped you got nothing. That's how the world has turned into after a sleep. What an unfair world. You're a priest of darkness. What do you know about fairness? Contrary to popular beliefs, the god of darkness is a god that put a lot of emphasis on equality and fairness. And I'm friend with the god of order. I rolled my eyes at him. And don't forget you're now a visitor in the temple of darkness. He smiled at me. What do you want? Macaroons? Maybe my stepmother isn't as bad as you have said. Then I would be worrying over nothing. Want to bet? He leaned over and his face was only an inch from me. I had actually believed him about my stepmother. I was just saying out of spite. If my stepmother was involved, a lot of things could actually be explained. From my experience with dealing with Rochelle, Rochelle was someone with not a single drop of evilness in her heart. So it boggled me that her suitors, who were like mindless creatures that followed every command of hers, came up with such a cruel plan just to get rid of me in my first life. But if it's her stepmother? Also in my third life, I had escaped as soon as Rochelle entered the scene. After 7 years, who would have still remembered me? But as soon as I was captured, gossips about me bullying Rochelle circulated. Gossips with excruciating details about my family and I that only insiders would know. It had always bothered me. Now it could be explained if my stepmother was involved. I'd rather not bet with him out of spite. I avoided his glance. Scared? His lips quirked. His face was still just an inch away from me. Finally I decided to just close my eyes to await punishment to befall me. Turned out my stepmother had already started working. Rumors of me having several lovers and always not returning home spread throughout the capital. That's ridiculous. What's the point of this? I rolled my eyes. Isabel, come. Isabel stopped playing with Blake near the furnace and ran towards me. Isabel sat in front of me and tilted its tiny head. I patted Isabel on its head. Help me give this to Sarah. I will treat you to another huge meal after this. I placed a bottle of potion and a note in front of Isabel. After a sound of meow, Isabel disappeared with the bottle and note. Eve, who was lying on the sofa with a book covering his face throughout all these, took off the book on his face after Isabel disappeared. You're going to leave her off just like that? He asked. That's boring. Sorry, it doesn't satisfy your twisted heart for entertainment. I shrugged nonchalantly. It's just not worth my time. The truth potion should do the job. Which truth potion did you make? An evil glimmer in his eyes. I made the truth potion from your spellbook. I knew there's something evil about this truth potion in the spellbook of a high priest of darkness. I cried and clapped excitedly. Was I influenced by the twisted Eve? Why was I so excited? I said it's not worth my time to confront my stepmother, but giving her a lesson was another thing altogether. I had already asked Sarah to add that potion in my stepmother's breakfast. I had instructed Sarah to mention the bad rumors about me circulating lately during breakfast, acting as a concerned maid. To my father, this will probably trigger the truth potion. Oh, it's nothing special. People taking this truth potion won't stop talking until they have revealed every single lie they have said and every single bad thing they have done in their lives. An evil smile occupied his face. I wonder how many lies your stepmother have concocted to grasp your father's heart. Maybe she is as innocent as snow as my dear stepsister. I did not believe that sentence one bit. Now I was getting excited about this huge drama. A normal truth potion certainly could not achieve this. My stepmother has been sent to the countryside to recover from her illness. Next week is Rochelle's birthday party. Please return to the estate. I read out the note Sarah sent me through Isabel. What a dull punishment for your stepmother. Eve said. What a boring father you have. He shook his head in disappointment and walked away, dragging his long robe with him. As expected, in order to safeguard the family's reputation, father just sent my stepmother to the countryside, adding to the fact that father needed Rochelle to continue on the marriage between my family and Henry's. Now that I had declared I would not take back Henri, father couldn't simply divorce my stepmother, so our great act continued. I had to attend Rochelle's birthday party. I even had to find a present for her. It's alright, I just buy something from the town near the Temple of Darkness. You are going back? Eve asked with an arched brow. He was still lying leisurely on his sofa reading a book. I responded by raising my eyebrow. Sad entertainment is leaving you and you're going to rot in boredom? He chuckled and shook his head. I want a box of macaroons. As rent. Made by you, of course. He smiled. I glared at him as I threw a cushion at him. Rent. I humphed. Never seen someone this thick-skinned. I am going to town to shop, I said as I put on my cloak. Let me show you around. He finally left the sofa and walked over. He helped me with the hood of my cloak. It's my town after all. He smiled graciously. I eyed him suspiciously. This seemed like a trap. Don't you need someone to hold your bags and baggage during your shopping spree? He said with a fake doting smile on his smile. You're planning something. I was still eyeing him with suspicion. I was not falling for that. Won't you be punished by those priests for setting foot outside of your temple? Those fools are probably drunk. They were quite angry when they left the temple that day. Now let's go. Blake, prepare our carriage. He grasped my hand and dragged me out of the temple. I was still deep in thoughts when his carriage brought us down the hill to the town closest to the temple. He must be planning something. I had never seen him that enthusiastic. Or had I? In a confused state of mind, the afternoon passed by with Eve shopping with me. He really helped with the baggage and bags like a gentlemanly shopping partner. To my horror, he even gave opinions on which dress to buy. Can you stop giving me this side-eye glance? You made me feel like I am some kind of bad guy about to harm you. And can you say confidently you're not? I am the High Priest of Darkness. Odette. He helped tuck a strand of my hair back. But I can say pretty confidently I won't harm you, he said with a smile. Aha. I looked out of the carriage window. I hope he didn't catch the blush over my cheeks. I nearly believed him. Odette, be careful. He's the High Priest of Darkness. So you bought this necklace for your dear sister? I turned my head to find him taking an amethyst necklace out from the box. His fingers brushed over the huge amethyst pendant. Yeah, where did you go when I'm buying this necklace? I asked as I grabbed the necklace back and placed it back into the soft padded box. Why should I be present when you're picking a gift for your stepsister? He shrugged. That's a waste of my time. What? I closed my mouth just in time. Then did that mean it's not a waste of his time when he's shopping with me? I shook my head to clear my head. Stop shaking. He placed his hand over my head. I fear you injure the remaining brain you have. I rolled my eyes as I threw my purse at him. I smiled elegantly as I excused myself from the fifth guy who approached me today. They were all from established noble families and they all had one point in common. They all weren't heirs to their families. They were insignificant to their families. They all approached me hinting they did not mind marrying into my family. This was Rochelle's birthday party, but at the same time my father set up dozens of blind dates for me. Was he this concerned with marrying me off as quickly as possible so that Rochelle can marry into Henry's family? I could not take it anymore. I clenched my teeth in annoyance. I looked around the premise this party was taking place and located Rochelle. Rochelle, happy birthday. I congratulated her with a smile plastered on my face. This is my present for you. I placed the gift box containing the necklace into her hand. Thank you, Odette. You have finally returned from your holiday. I missed you. Rochelle came over and gave me an embrace. I received a glare from the silver-haired guy, Lucian, standing just behind Rochelle. I rolled my eyes internally. Poor Lucian. You won't be happy if you're this possessive. Rochelle had at least 5 more suitors surrounding her at all time. How's your quest so far, Rochelle? I asked curiously. Last I heard, she's heading to Earth Temple. If she succeeded, then Eve Temple would be her next goal. Eve was definitely planning something. Everything started from the time he was killed in my first life. He evoked the spell to reincarnate the both of us for 4 more times. This time he had finally recovered from the drain from casting that spell. For some unknown reason, I believed all the time he spent on plotting and finally his plan would set to motion in this life. I recovered the shard. Odette, it's a tough fight, she said dejectedly. Lucian was injured from saving me. Tears were brimming in her eyes when Lucian comforted her by hugging her close. Rochelle gave Lucian a thankful look and griped his hand. Why won't they understand? Rochelle cried. The shards want to be one again. My soul aches from hearing the cries of the shards. Your soul aches? That's an interesting way to put it. All I could do was to nod as if I understood how soul could ache. Now, Rochelle said as Lucian brushed away the tears slipping down her face gently. One last piece is left. Then the shards will be one again. Congrats, Rochelle. But where is the last piece? I asked innocently, as if I had no idea where the last piece was. It's in the Temple of God of Darkness. Her beautiful eyes dimmed for a second, before her expression became resolved again. I'll get to it, no matter how much hardship I have to go through. I did not know how to respond. All I could do was to smile supportively and change the topic. See if you like your birthday present. She opened the box and picked up the amethyst necklace inside it. It's so pretty. Odette, her eyes brightened at the sight of the necklace. Thank you so much. Lucian, quick, help me put it on. Her fingers lingered on the huge amethyst pendant. Is the necklace that pretty? I thought it's pretty common. I didn't really put that much thought into Rochelle's gift. I just picked up something suitable for her status. Maybe she just liked amethyst or she's just being nice. I shrugged it off. With a few more friendly exchange, I sneaked back into my bedroom. Luckily, father wasn't concerned with spying me this time. I was reading a novel in my room when a flower appeared in front of me. It's the flower found only in the garden of the Temple of Darkness. I looked up to find Eve standing in front of me, a lazy smile on his face. I pursed my lips in worries. What are you doing here? I asked in a hushed voice. Rochelle is in this mansion too. What if she discovers you? You know her luck. What if she suddenly has this intuition to burst into my room? He arched his eyebrow in response. Without even having the need to spy on her, she's sure to be with one of her suitors and there must be 2 more waiting in line to meet her. Your stepsister's life is very predictable. He had a point. But that still does not explain why you are here. B. Don't tell me you're bored. I glared at him. Bring you a message. He looked at me with exasperation. A message? You know where your stepsister is heading next? He asked knowingly. I nodded solemnly. She'll probably visit me in. He placed the flower he was holding next to a windowsill. 4 days' time. Why did he tell me this? Did he want me to do something? And all you have to do is stay in this room. I widened my eyes in confusion. Don't set foot anywhere near the temple. Just stay nicely in this room. Odette, he said as he stood right in front of me, hands pressing firmly on my shoulders, as he stared solemnly at me. But, oh, I know, you must be curious. You can scry all you want. I can even teach you a spell. Just promise me one thing. Do not under any circumstance come near the temple. He leaned forward and whispered the last part next to my ear. Understand? What? What are you planning to do? I asked hesitantly. Nothing. He was still circling me in his arms, trapping me in the armchair I was sitting in. I am going to invite her and her knights into my temple like the friendly host I am. His voice grew softer as his arms around me grew tighter. The end had come. Just like that last day we spent together before I was executed in my second life. But this time, it's for the 2 of us. Together. I was pacing in my room for the 10th times. It's 4 days after Rochelle's birthday party and 4 days since Eve's last visit. Today was the day Rochelle would visit the Temple of God of Darkness. Should I perform that scrying spell Eve gave me before he left? I paced from one side of my room to another while thinking. I looked down to find side of my dress crumpled. Without noticing, I had been wringing my dress. What's Eve planning? I knew all I had to do was to perform the scrying spell. Then everything would be clear. But I was scared. Scared the scene in front of me would be Rochelle and her knights defeating Eve or worse killing him. Stop. Odette. It's no use killing yourself inside out like this. It would not help with the matter. Decided, I returned to my four-poster bed and covered myself with my down quilt. I took out the crystal ball Eve gave me and muttered the spell he had whispered next to my ear. Mist began to fill the once clear crystal ball. When the mist cleared, the hall of the Temple of Darkness appeared. The hall with a throne. Eve was sitting on the throne, his face covered with his usual mask, his usual smile on his face. Facing him was Rochelle and her knights in shining armor. There were 7 of them. It's 8 against 1. How's that fair? I began to fidget with my finger. No matter how powerful Eve was, it's still Rochelle with 7 very competent sorcerers. Adding to the fact that Rochelle was nearly unbeatable. Good day, the High Priest of Darkness. Rochelle curtsied with a sweet smile on her face. I am coming for the shard that I believe is currently under your possession. Would you be so kind as to offer me that poor shard so that they can reunite again? Rochelle cupped her hands in front of her and after a shimmer, an object with a glimmer so strong that it hurt my eyes appeared in her hands. The object emitted rays of light in all colors but you cannot discern any color separately. The object was in the form of a heart, but it's missing one vital piece. Must be the last shard. A heart? An idea appeared in my mind, but before I could grasp it, it slipped away. Rochelle was still smiling sweetly and together with a shining heart in her hands. She looked like a saint coming to purify the world. It may look like a peaceful exchange if you omitted the fact that the 7 knights surrounding Rochelle were all glaring at Eve, their weapons all brandished so they could attack any second. Reunite? Eve asked with a smile on his lips. Yes, reunite. The final shard is beckoning my soul. It yearns to reunite with the other shards. Silence soon followed. It's the longest few seconds I had experienced. Then Eve said, of course. He snapped his finger and then I could see the ground began to shake. The knights quickly surrounded Rochelle and started to throw spells at Eve. Eve tapped his foot and dark mist surrounded him. All the spells targeted at him dissolved as soon as they touched the mist. After a few seconds, the dark mist cleared. Eve shook his head. Such impatience. You asked for the shard in my temple, so I give it to you. He gestured to a raised stone pillar in front of Rochelle, a shimmering piece of shard laying on top of a cushion. Priests these days have such poor manners. Rochelle's eyes were fixated on the shard on the cushion. She walked forward, her hand out as if in a trance. Henry's hand grasped her on the shoulder and said, Rochelle, it might be a trap. No, it's not. The shard is beckoning me. This is the last piece. Her eyes turned frantic. There might be traps near the shard. Rochelle, it can't be that simple, cried one of Rochelle's knights. One by one, they tried to stop Rochelle. But Rochelle, with a frantic look on her face, walked closer and closer to the shard, omitting every caution from her knights, pushing away any hand coming in her way. Finally she had the final shard in her hand. As soon as the final shard melts with the heart-like object in her hand, rays of light shone out, blinding me momentarily. When my vision returned, the now completed heart was now floating in the air. Eve was still sitting on his throne, with the same confident smile on his face. Like he was not surprised such thing would happen. Maybe he wouldn't as, like me, he had repeated his life again and again. Eve said he was killed in his first life. Was he killed because he refused to give Rochelle the shard? But never had Rochelle killed anyone in her quest. Yes, those high priests were severely injured, but not killed. And judging from his attitude right from the start, he did not care about the shards. Or to put it in another way, he did not care about the shards when they're still separated. He wanted them in one. And Rochelle, without knowing, was doing the job for him? He wanted to take the crystal heart from Rochelle's hand, but was killed by Rochelle and her knights? But why didn't he do it himself? He had the power. Could it be that only Rochelle can get hold of the shards? Rochelle was the only one in centuries to be able to break the wards surrounding the shard in Wind Temple. Rochelle was the key? Just who was she? At that moment, the crystal heart started to shine once again and then it went straight into the body of Lucian, the silver-haired man next to Rochelle. Rochelle's suitor. The man that appeared after Rochelle broke the curse on the stray dog she rescued. Lucian clutched his heart. And finally Eve left his throne. He knelt down, with his left hand over his heart and lowered his head. He said, Lucian, the god of light, please accept my humble greetings. The god of light. What? I widened my eyes in shock. God of light? Rochelle mumbled. So Eve's goal was to revive the god of light? But wasn't he a high priest of god of darkness? And why would that get him killed in his first life? I was getting more and more confused. Lucian, or the alleged god of light, hugged his head in pain. Lucian, Rochelle cried. She tried to soothe his pain by hugging him. What happened? Why are you in so much pain? Tears began brimming in her eyes. Lucian screamed in pain while hugging his head. Lucian, tears streamed down her face. What can I do to soothe your pain? How I wish I could bear your pain. Lucian, it breaks my heart to see you like that. The god of light is not complete, Eve said, unless the last piece is returned. Otherwise, he's simply a mortal bearing god memories with no godly power. Especially those memories aren't meant to befall a mortal. The last piece? Rochelle asked. I have collected every last piece of shard my soul called me to. Again this phrase. Wait. Soul? Could it be that the last piece is? Rochelle, don't you dare. Arden, Lucian cried out through clenched teeth. He stood forward and shielded Rochelle from Eve. He tried to use his power. Just like how Eve said, his power was nowhere near godly level. If Rochelle was the last piece, everything would make sense. If Eve's goal was to revive the god of light all along, he would need to get hold of Rochelle. As by the evident way of Lucian protecting Rochelle with the mention of last piece, the last piece might mean taking Rochelle's life. Otherwise, Lucian did not have to be all worked up at the mention of that last piece. Eve died in his first life trying to kill Rochelle. Lucian might not have a god's power, but he had a god's memory. He might find a way to defend himself and Rochelle. Adding to the fact that Rochelle seemed to be very blessed by gods. She herself was a genius unmatched by even high priests of other temples. Dare what? Eve asked. He was back onto his throne. I have not moved an inch since you guys entered the Temple of Darkness. I'm just explaining the situation we have on hand now. Lucian eyed Eve with uncertainty. Wait, what is the meaning of the last piece? Rochelle demanded behind the close protect of all her 7 knights. Eve's lips quirked up and said, it's inside your soul. My soul? Rochelle asked confusedly. And then her face turned determined. How can I save Lucian? How can I return this last piece from my soul back to Lucian? No, Rochelle, you don't have to do that. His hand gently caressed Rochelle's face. I can live without that last piece. Rochelle, being Rochelle, of course had none of that sort. No, don't you see, you're suffering. I have to help you. Do tell me, Your Grace, how can I save Lucian? She clasped her hands and looked at Eve with her teary eyes. It's very simple. Eve's lips quirked into a perfect smile. All you have to do is to die. He snapped his finger and then immediately Rochelle clasped her heart in pain. Blood began to drip down the corner of her mouth. The knights started to attack Eve soon after that. What did you do to Rochelle? They demanded. Lucian immediately tried to heal Rochelle with his power. But no matter what he did, Rochelle coughed out more blood. I am just fulfilling her wish. Eve shrugged as he said, all the while sidestepping all the spells thrown in his way at ease. You'll also like. Reincarnated person change the system by Miss Dreamer_writes. Reincarnated person change the system. My name is Aika Asami, a normal teenage girl who just died from saving an unknown child from being hit by a car, assuming that I'm already died. A voice of an old man spoke. Till death tears me apart once again, discontinued, by Never Sheen Again. Till death tears me apart once again, discont. Quat. If I'm going to die anyway, there's no point in trying to live. Quat. A typical reincarnated into a villainous story, except the protagonist isn't your typical, She becomes a passive villainous not. By Halloween Godspell, she becomes a passive villainous not. Falling into the fiery hell she created must have been the perfect way for her to die. The other woman would then become the heroine that saved the townspeople from the Benevolent Miracle Doctor, completed, in progress of editing, by Rosman Kuz. The Benevolent Miracle Doctor, completed, The famous martial artist Lien Daiyu was at the top of the ranks and no one could rival against her with miraculous medicines that she created. Even high-ranked Dr. H. Little Flower has become fierce by Dark_Rose_07. Little Flower has become fierce. Sarah Martinez was an heir of one of the biggest business organizations and a secret trained assassin, but unfortunately she died in one of her missions. But instead of G. Rochelle, don't die. Rochelle, Rochelle. Lucian muttered softly. He was doing all he can, but Rochelle's breath grew softer and softer. At last, after she gave Lucian one last smile, she closed her eyes forever. Something sharp pierced at my heart. That can't be. Rochelle just dying like this? This simply? Even though Rochelle had made my life miserable, she was still a person. A person who was nice to everyone in her life. Even Eve couldn't succeed in killing in his first life. But she just lost her life so easily within a few seconds this life. Something was wrong. Something unnatural. As soon as Rochelle's life withered, something bright and shiny arises from her body. It then broke into million of pieces. One piece flew into Lucian's body. Power and light rushed into his body, until finally he changed. His appearance did not change, but the vibe he gave off was definitely different from the mortal he was before. He caressed Rochelle's face one last time and then he stood up. "You'll regret this, Arden," he said as he disappeared from the temple. Eve's face turned ashen. Worries appeared on his face. Worries for... Before I could finish my thought, a hand snaked around my throat and strangled me. I began to struggle as my sight turned more and more blurry. "It has nothing to do with her, God of Light." Eve's voice seemed to appear out of nowhere. "Are we back to the temple? Then the one strangling me must be the God of Light," I realized. The god's hand over my neck loosened a bit. Air rushed into my lung as my vision got clearer. Eve was kneeling in front of Lucian as he eyed me with worries in his eyes. "Nothing to do with her?" Lucian laughed mockingly. "Don't you think that can pass my eyes? If it wasn't for her birthday gift, will you even be able to kill my dear Rochelle?" He boomed angrily. "Yes, the curse might be on the necklace, but it's still my doing," Eve said. "It has nothing to do with Odette. She has no idea I placed a curse on the gift. I might not be able to kill you," Lucian said, "but I can kill her." His hold on my neck strengthened once again. "If my death can soothe your anger and save Odette's life, I can fulfill your wish," Eve said determinedly. He then started chanting a spell. Lucian's piqued by Eve's words, loosened his hold on me. I was thrown onto the ground mercilessly. After gasping for air, my vision got clearer and saw Eve's face had turned really pale. And finally, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. She shouldn't be dragged into this mess to begin with. She should be the sole daughter of her father and live her life as the heir. He stopped to catch his breath. But the gods dragged her into their game. They changed her fate. The appearance of her stepsister. The blessings on Rochelle. "I am just making up for the mess you gods created. Please let her go. I admire your dedication to save your lover," the God of Light said. "But nothing can bring back my Rochelle. Nothing can soothe my anger. Not even your death." With that, a beam of light shot out from his palm. Like a lightning bolt, it shot through my stomach. "Odette." His face turned more ashen and started coughing uncontrollably. I lay on the cold marble stone of the temple as blood bled out from my stomach. I was surprisingly calm. This was so familiar to me. Dying once again. Will this finally end? I thought back to Eve's words. Was the gods the reason for my misfortunes? Was I just a chess piece in their game? Something to be discarded once her mission was completed. Something cold touched my hand. "It's Eve." He had staggered his way across the temple. His expression was just like that night before my death in my second life. A hint of sadness, a hint of regret and what? "I am sorry, Odette," he said weakly. I raised my eyebrow in surprise. Did the tyrant just apologize? I thought I could make it up to you by giving the poor girl who was being drawn into the game of gods another chance of life. I was too full of myself. "Nothing can escape the gods," he said wistfully. He caressed my face. "This is your last life. And mine. All your misery will end." My fingers shook as I tried to caress his face with my other hand. I smiled in relief. So in the end this reborn curse on me was not solely for his entertainment, although I did think this was also part of the reason why he put the curse on me in the first place. Can you hug me one last time? I feel cold," I said faintly. Eve returned my embrace as he cradled me in his arms. When I was growing colder and colder from the loss of blood, I sensed a presence similar to the God of Light had appeared in the temple. "Odette, don't forget that your wish is to die after a long life. After you have grown old," Eve whispered into my ear. I glanced at the face just inches from me, to find the mask of sadness over his face a while ago was gone. In its place was his usual smile. That was when I realized, all of it was his plan. No wonder I didn't die after bleeding for such a long time. "Lucian, did that girl really mean that much to you? To the point that you have to kill my sole supporter in revenge?" A cold voice boomed in the temple. "You won't understand," Lucian cried in anguish. "You didn't understand thousands of years ago. You still don't. Rochelle is my life. Without her, what's the point in becoming God again?" Well, that's one shocking speech. I did not know if I was to applaud for their love or roll my eyes at such dramatic declaration. I realized now, my wound might seem serious, but I wasn't dying as I had expected. The power of a god should be fatal to us mortals, but the wound wasn't even as painful as I had expected. It was not even up to par to the stabbing wound I had in my previous life. That's weird. I was still being cradled in Eve's arm. He even had the decency to play with the bracelet on my wrist. Wait, didn't he play with my bracelet a while back? When we're riding back from town, on the day I bought Rochelle her birthday gift. I glared at him as he returned a knowing smile. Did he place a protective spell on the bracelet? To absorb part of the power of the spell Lucian threw at me? A sigh brought me back to reality. I just don't understand, where did your intense love come from? How long have you known each other? A few weeks at best. And then you have to throw everything away? Even your life? The cold voice sneered in distaste. The voice was from a dark hooded figure hovering in the center of the temple, in front of Lucian. Someone as heartless as you will not understand even with 1,000,000 years of time, Lucian retorted. He then began to attack the hooded man. Killing off Rochelle must be your order. I am saving you, my dear brother. If you don't return, the other gods plan to replace you. This whole plan is to overthrow you. Don't you understand? They merged a piece of you with that girl's soul and recreated Rochelle so as to lure you into their trap. Look what you're about to do if Eve didn't kill Rochelle. You're about to give up your godly power. You're about to die as a mortal. That's my choice, at least as a mortal. I can spend the rest of my life with Rochelle. Now as the god of light, what do I get? Rochelle isn't even here with me. He continued to fight with his brother, the god of darkness. According to the lore, the god of light and the god of darkness were actually twins. That meant the hooded figure facing Lucian must be the god of darkness. When will you grow some brains, brother? You're a god. You have the power of a god. If you want your dear Rochelle so badly, just collect the pieces of her soul floating around you when they're still present. Then you still have some chance of reviving her. But what are you doing? Killing my soul follower, ruining my temple, he humphed in anger. The hooded figure that was the god of darkness raised his hand. A glob began to form in his palm. With a flick of his other hand, a puppet in the shape of Rochelle began to form from the rubble Lucian created in the temple. He forcefully pushed the glob into the marble puppet and then clapped his hand. See, that's how you use the power of a god. Her body might be ruined, but you can create one for her. Only the useless weeps when facing a problem. What a disgrace of a brother. What a disgrace to us gods. The hooded figure then walked towards us, abandoning his brother who was weeping with joy as the marble puppet that was Rochelle opened her eyes. The god of darkness' face was still covered by the shadows of the hood. If he was Lucian's twin brother, would the two of them look very alike? Don't you let me catch you trying to kill yourself off before you have groomed the next high priest. He sneered angrily at Eve. I will not let you go even if you become a ghost. Care to come any later? Otherwise, you won't even be able to summon my ghost, Eve said as he pulled me up from the floor. That was then I realized my wound had stopped oozing and not an ounce of pain was left. But, my lord, Eve continued in a sing-song manner, it might be best for you leave now. The god of order might appear anytime. Reviving Rochelle, though a spectacular act, was a deed against his book of order. He smirked after finishing the last sentence. The god of darkness cleared his throat and then said, the mortal world is just as stuffy as always. The mortal world is not for powerful gods like you, my lord. The god of darkness nodded approvingly and then disappeared into dark mist. I eyed the entire exchange with my mouth left agape. Was the god of darkness afraid of the god of order? The god of order is a nightmare, Eve said, his usual mask of laziness back on his face. The god of light is an idiot. The god of darkness is a talkative old man. Best send him away as soon as possible. Huh? Come on, I'm tired. Let's get some sleep. He then dragged me away while grasping my hand, leaving the rubble, the lovebirds and the third wheels, Rochelle's knights, behind us. I couldn't fall asleep. Things I had gone through this afternoon kept boggling my mind. Rochelle was killed and then she was kind of revived again. The dog-turned silver-haired suitor of Rochelle was actually the god of light. Even though the spelling of dog and god was just mirrored, that didn't mean I could accept that. And most important of all, I was just a chess piece in a game of gods. All my miseries were just inconsequential to them, it seemed. Even the god of darkness kept talking about the game the gods were playing. But what exactly was that game? I rolled over for the 10th times. I couldn't fall asleep. I needed to get some answers. Eve, wake up, I called while shaking him. Wake up, wake up, wake up. The guy in front of me groaned as he covered his eyes with his forearm. I said you could wake me up when you needed me, but never have I expected this. Can't your curiosity wait? No. I am just so glad you now know how to use my name. So glad. He smiled like he wanted to kill me. What do you want to know? The truth. Just what are the gods planning? Do you know besides us mortals, the gods, there was once a third type of creatures in this world? He ruffled his hair with one hand and with his other grabbed the cup of tea I had prepared for him. You need some incentive for a lazy high priest to tell you bedtime story. I pushed forward a plate of macaroon I made. I thought back to the lore of our kingdom. The beasts? The beasts were the nightmares of every child in this country. They were the villains in every fairy tale. They were what stopped people from exploring the deep woods. Lore had it that the beasts were now residing in the forbidden woods near the border of our country. That's just the lore. Once in a while, there were some who weren't afraid of death and had a crave for adventures venturing into the forbidden woods, but rarely would they return. Those selected few who returned had their power greatly improved, but they all lost their memories. As if they signed a contract with a devil that made them give up their memories in return for great power. Eve took a bite of the macaroon in his hand and said, many, many years ago, mortals, the gods and the beasts live along peacefully. Well, the gods treated mortals as their servants all the while ignoring the existence of the beasts. Mortals, with a lot of help from the gods, started to invade lands of the beasts. The gods at that time still lingered in our land all the time. They found mortals entertaining. This fragile balance continued on for a long time. Guess what happened next? The beasts were dissatisfied? If I was in the position of the beasts, I would too. The beasts were basically ignored by mortals and humans alike, and their living habitats were invaded by mortals. The beasts were a huge bunch. Some were as weak as mortals, but some had power as powerful as the gods. The stronger ones decided to revolt against the gods. They devised a plan to pull down the gods. That's where Rochelle came in. According to what the old man said, the beasts handpicked a beauty who had a heart of gold and sent her into the Temple of Light. He rolled his eyes. As I said, the gods lingered with the mortals quite a lot back then, and the god of light was a fool. Was he referring the god of darkness as the old man? Putting one and one together. So the god of light fell in love with Rochelle. But how did this kill him? He is a god. While the gods and mortals use sorcery, the beasts were born with their powers and abilities. Didn't you learn anything from your own bedtime stories? The hints were all there. Bedtime stories are tales written by victors. He smiled cruelly. In those stories, the villainous beasts had all kind of powers and abilities. Like venom, like a voice to hypnotize people, like from their bones they can form the most invincible weapon. They could change their appearance to look similar to us mortals, but they were also a beast at the same time. Rochelle was part of the beast? No, she was a mortal through and through. She was just hypnotized by one beast and she carried out the plan perfectly. The beasts gave her a dagger specifically designed to shatter a soul of God, and the hypnotized Rochelle killed the god of light with the dagger. In the end, the soul of god of light shattered into 1,000,000 shards. And the gods didn't notice a thing at that time? I asked. The god of darkness and his high priest knew quite a lot of details. Well, Eve smiled mischievously. Do you think it's possible? Those were dark thoughts and plans of darkness. So, the god of darkness knew about this plan all along? And he didn't stop them from killing his brother? Eve shrugged. He found it entertaining. The most entertaining thing he found in years. He was never neutral to begin with. He is the god of darkness. He can start wars so as to entertain himself. For all I know, the idea of invading lands of the beasts might even be instigated by him. So he just stood by the side when the beasts were plotting to kill his brother and the plan took action. He is a god. A god is prideful and narcissistic. Eve smirked. Who knew his brother is such an idiot? So he thought his brother could spot the trap and kill Rochelle. But in the end his brother was a god who found love more important than his life. But by putting together the shards of his soul, they could revive him. Why did the gods simply keep those shards in their own temples? I pointed out. The gods are all a bunch of power-hunger maniacs. Back then the twin brothers of light and darkness were the most powerful. They were like the kings above them. Now one was down. Do you think they would allow the god of light to be revived and reigning them again? But wouldn't the god of darkness disagree? Who knows what the old man was thinking at that time? Maybe he was entertained. Maybe he thought his idiot brother deserved a punishment. Maybe he was too embarrassed to say anything. If it was me, I would have just let this idiot rot in hell. But the beasts still failed in the end, didn't they? Of course. Even though the other gods sat back when the beasts killed a powerful god, the gods responded by showing their gratitude by banishing them into the forbidden woods. Gods are ungrateful. He shrugged nonchalantly. The god of darkness said Rochelle was recreated by the gods as a trap for the god of light. Why set out Rochelle to revive him now if they want the god of light gone? See how lack of sleep messes with your brain? He tapped on my brain. It's the god of darkness who wants to revive his brother. Or else why'd I need to evoke this reborn curse we both hate so much? Wait. After Lucian regained all his memory, he chose to live on and die as a mortal instead of killing Rochelle. The other gods wanted to kill Lucian once and for all. I widened my eyes in shock. As I said, the world is a chessboard for the gods. We are just the chess pieces. Eve looked at me with his knowing red eyes. Now, after telling you a bedtime story, it's time for you to sleep.